I think there's always, when a story like this breaks, there's always powerful people who are peddling misinformation. It's a very simple story in many respects. The great pity of this story is the reason it's of great interest in Australia is because it involves this new NRL franchise, the entry of Papua New Guinea into Australia's National Rugby League. If not for that, would Australians be interested in alleged corruption involving PNG's national oil company? I suspect not. We'd see it as a PNG problem. So to that extent, the fact that it does involve this NRL deal, Australia, PNG and China, that's why it's of interest. But at its heart, this is a story about a powerful person, Wapu Sonk, allegedly abusing his power to line his own pockets. How did he do this?
Real talk, true stories, and PNG over coffee. This is a space for real conversations about the challenges, triumphs, and untold stories of Papua New Guinea. Over a cup of coffee, we speak the truth, we share insight, and explore different perspectives on issues that matter. Coffee with Lewa is where dialogue flows freely, voices are heard, and ideas are shared to spark understanding and change. So, grab your coffee, because as always, it's going to be a good one. Hello and welcome back to Coffee with Lewa, a podcast where we have honest and courageous conversations with people who are shaping Papua New Guinea and the Pacific region for the better. Today, we are honored to be joined by someone whose work has inspired investigative journalists across the world, Nick McKenzie. Nick is Australia's most decorated investigative journalist. He has won 20 Walkley Awards, including the prestigious Gold Walkley, and has earned national and international recognition for fearless reporting on corruption, corporate misconduct, war crimes, and political accountability. Many Papua New Guineans will know him from 60 Minutes Australia, a program many of us grew up watching with our families on a Sunday night, and from his powerful reporting in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Great to be with you.
Let's start at the beginning of your journey. Many know you, as I said, from 60 Minutes Australia on our side of the world, but Nick, you have built an extraordinary career in investigative journalism. Australia's most awarded journalist with 20 Walkley Awards, including the Gold Walkley, and a portfolio that spans 60 Minutes, The Age, and the Sydney Morning Herald. What first drew you to investigative journalism, and why is it so vital in defending democracy and keeping power in check, especially in this era of rising misinformation and institutional distrust?
I'm passionate about democracy. I'm passionate about justice. I'm passionate about exposing the abuse of power. And very early on in my career, I was actually drawn to Papua New Guinea because Australia has such a vital relationship with PNG. And one of the earliest stories I did with The Age and Sydney Morning Herald newspaper when I was a 20-something-year-old reporter involved flying over to Port Moresby to meet a man in a hotel who was a government official who gave me all these secret documents about corruption involving the powerful in PNG in the hope that Australian media exposure would prompt the PNG officials to take corruption more seriously or ensure that the wrongdoers would be held to account. Now, we reported the stories years and years ago now, and I can say very little happened. And unfortunately, that's been a real pattern. I think it's not a PNG problem, it's a PNG and Australian problem. What we see most recently, I think, is that sort of cross-border corruption that we've seen in the most recent reporting involving allegations of impropriety with the national oil company, Kumul Petroleum. This can only be done with Australian facilitators, Australian real estate agents, Australian lawyers, Australian business people who are prepared to facilitate corruption or, I think in this case, allegedly to potentially line their own pockets at the expense of the people of PNG. And that makes me furious. I must say, to know that PNG still has significant poverty problems, as we know. The people of PNG deserve better, and to have Australian business people and Australian corporate and legal structures, we love to be high and mighty over here, but we are part of the problem, and there's nothing more disgusting, I think, than understanding that the national wealth of PNG is being compromised in some cases by misconduct over here.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing light to that and standing firm on that, because you're right. There's a syndicate of people that continue to benefit from corruption like this. When you look at all the parties, you're looking at a lot of countries there that are involved. So thank you for acknowledging that. Let's now turn to the story that brought us together today. Your recent reporting, as you mentioned, on Kumul Petroleum and PNG's NRL bid. Now, you talked a little bit about that just now, but this story was breaking news in Papua New Guinea. Without revealing sources or methods, what initially led you to this investigation, and what did you find when you first came across the story involving Kumul Petroleum and the CEO Wapu Sonk and Papua New Guinea's NRL bid? Because there has been a lot of misinformation in Papua New Guinea suggesting that this story was driven by geopolitical tensions, specifically between Australia and China. How do you respond to those claims? And also, as I said earlier, what led you to this investigation, and what do you say to those people who question the motives behind this story?
I think there's always, when a story like this breaks, there's always powerful people who are peddling misinformation. It's a very simple story in many respects. The great pity of this story is the reason it's of great interest in Australia is because it involves this new NRL franchise, the entry of Papua New Guinea into Australia's National Rugby League. If not for that, would Australians be interested in alleged corruption involving PNG's national oil company? I suspect not. We'd see it as a PNG problem. So to that extent, the fact that it does involve this NRL deal, Australia, PNG and China, that's why it's of interest. But at its heart, this is a story about a powerful person, Wapu Sonk, allegedly abusing his power to line his own pockets. How did he do this? Well, the evidence suggests or points to, and at the moment it's allegations, but these are allegations backed up by documentary evidence. What do we see in that documentary evidence? We see that Kumul Petroleum, the entity that Wapu Sonk wields huge power over, told a Chinese government company, you ought to use 2 private companies in Australia. Now, one of those private companies is owned by Wapu Sonk privately. The evidence shows, I think, at least on paper, Kumul Petroleum using its power, its sway over this Chinese entity to award a contract to Wapu Sonk in a way that's totally inappropriate for a state-owned enterprise to do. It's as simple as that. But it goes deeper and further. The documentary evidence suggests that there has been negotiations between this Chinese government pipeline company and Kumul to set about this arrangement, which leads to questions. Who was doing this dealing behind the scenes? Who in Kumul was proposing that Wapu Sonk's private company, Australia, get benefits as part of this deal making? Was it Wapu himself? Was it his agents within Kumul? Now, whoever it was, it is clearly inappropriate, but these are questions that must be answered. Wapu Sonk is residing in a multi-million-dollar property in Brisbane. He's residing there with a woman called, I won't name names, but a female PNG resident who has a very close relationship with Wapu Sonk. We saw her living there. She was exiting the property. Now, that property is owned by another subcontractor of Kumul Petroleum. There is no way that a subcontractor of PNG's national oil company should be giving their private residence, multi-million-dollar residence, to Wapu Sonk, the MD of this national oil company, for his personal benefit. Is he paying rent? If so, is it at market rates? Regardless of whether he is or isn't, it's a clear conflict of interest. Now, if we take these 2 examples, a contract being funneled to a Wapu Sonk privately owned business, a multi-million-dollar property that Wapu Sonk is using, if those 2 things are happening, what else is happening? What other alleged corruption is occurring? Who else is involved in it? What about the board of Kumul Petroleum? What about those PNG politicians meant to be keeping an eye on Kumul? What are they doing? What about the Australians involved? We have players in Australia who are deeply involved in both these arrangements I've just described. One of them, his name is Jason Pollock. He's a senior project manager at Kumul Petroleum. You know, he's effectively a public servant of the people of PNG. It looks like he not only cooked up a deal in which Wapu Sonk could profit, but he himself stood to benefit from this same deal. Where's the accountability around him and his conduct? So who's going to investigate? And if that investigation takes place, will it be thorough? Where's the Australian Federal Police in all this? Where is the PNG ICAC? And of course, we know the PNG ICAC is a disaster, a basket case at the moment. I mean, ultimately, this comes down to the people of PNG having their resources and their money and their rights protected. In this case, though, seems to have been squashed. So who's going to be held to account?
Thank you for being with us. You're watching Coffee with Lewa. If you find this conversation meaningful, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share the link with your family and friends to join this vital conversation too. Let's help our audience understand a little bit more, because because, as you said, first it was geopolitics, and now the real questions present themselves. Who is actually involved, and why has no one done anything about it? So I'd like to help our audience understand the core of this investigation, which, I commend you on, because if you're not talking about it, then who is? And for those unfamiliar with this investigation, can you explain how an Australian registered company, Papua New Guinea Developments Proprietary Limited, was allegedly used by Wapu Sonk, who is the CEO of Kumul Petroleum, to benefit personally while leading Kumul Petroleum?
Well, so we got documentary evidence in the form of sometimes leaked paperwork that showed that there was this mysterious company in Australia, PNG Developments. Now, if you didn't know anything, if you didn't have the paperwork, it would simply be a corporate entity and you would not know who was behind it. Kumul Petroleum was telling one of its subcontractors, you must use this small Australian company to do work. You must pay it with funds which will ultimately be derived from the PNG taxpayer belonging to the people of PNG themselves. You must pay it, this Australian company, in order to do this work if you wish yourself to work in PNG. We looked at the shareholder registry using the Australian corporate record system to figure out who was the true owner of this Australian company. And sure enough, it's Wapu Sonk. It wasn't that well hidden, I must say. It seems like Wapu Sonk was using his position as the managing director of Kumul Petroleum to funnel contracts to a company he privately and secretly owned in Australia. But there is things that we don't know. This company and another like it set up around 2016. Using what looks like front directors. These are people I presume are known to Wapu Sonk, who aren't there really as real directors, they're fronts or cutouts to disguise his true involvement. That's what the paperwork suggests. We don't know that. Why don't we know that? Well, I tried to speak to Wapu Sonk. I called him over several days. I sent him many questions. He refused to answer those questions. He refused to talk to me. I offered him an off-the-record conversation, a confidential conversation. If there were reasonable explanations about this, he should clear the air, I told him. I'd listen to him, and if it was all innocent, then the story would never have been reported. Now, Wapu Sonk did not answer one question that we put to him. He declined to have an off-the-record conversation. He declined to have an on-the-record conversation. And I asked the question, why? Why not answer these questions? What was really interesting, though, was one of Wapu Sonk's project managers, this man, Jason Pollock. He did pick up the phone. He did admit to certain things. He did say, yes, there are elements of this deal that look stinky, i.e. look potentially corrupt. He claimed, though, that he did not know that a company that Kumul Petroleum and he himself, Jason Pollock, was promoting was truly owned by Wapu Sonk. He said, I had no idea my boss was the owner of that company. Now, I said to him, that sounds unbelievable. How could it be that you're promoting a private company in Australia using your title and position at Kumul Petroleum and you not be aware that that same company is owned by your boss at Kumul Petroleum? It seems most unbelievable. But that's certainly his position to date. And when there are unbelievable remarks put out there, it really needs an investigation to clear up. And this is where we're at now. Is PNG, is the Australian government serious about getting to the bottom of this? I hope they are. But I think if we look at past investigations, both done by Australian authorities and done by PNG authorities, what we know from history is it's very rare that a corruption investigation is actually successful and that those up the tree are actually held to account.
Yes, exactly. And you said it. Even our ICAC is completely weakened right now. So I know there were reports from the government saying that they want to take action, but who's taking action, we don't know. So for those unfamiliar with this investigation, can you go into detail as to how that would be corruption? Say if an Australian company is registered called PNG Developments and they're dealing without the knowledge of the Papua New Guinean citizens, because KPHL is a state-owned enterprise. That is seen as corruption.
Wapu Sonk is the head of Kumul Petroleum. He must not ever use Kumul Petroleum to do anything but promote the interests of the PNG people, the PNG national economy and its social well-being. He must not, in any circumstance, use Kumul Petroleum to profit himself. I'm not saying he shouldn't be getting a salary, of course, but that's in the annual report. That's governed by a board. We all know about that. But in this circumstance, what looks like was happening was Kumul Petroleum was using its power and might in PNG to force its subcontractors to use a company, possibly more than one company, secretly controlled by Wapu Sonk, to pay these companies in a way that would derive Wapu Sonk's secret benefits. Now, that's an abuse of power. Wapu Sonk's power is not his own. It's that of Kumul Petroleum. And again, that power of Kumul Petroleum, its power in the PNG landscape, should be there to profit for the people of PNG, to advance the people, not to advance the personal interests of Wapu Sonk. And these are questions, again, that only Wapu Sonk can truly answer. Why was Kumul Petroleum telling its subcontractors to use a company privately and secretly owned by Wapu Sonk? And now, if he's not going to answer those questions, you need a proper commission of inquiry, a proper investigation to get to the bottom of it. There will be a paper trail. There will be a money trail. There may be properties bought in Australia. We need to look at all these things to make sure that the PNG people and the Australian public know the extent about what's going on here, and that those who've done the wrong thing are held to account.
Exactly. The article reveals a complex web of connections, as we've spoken about, and alleged misconduct, which you went into some detail just earlier. And there are multiple layers of this misconduct, as we've discovered, because your article actually specifically mentions those misconducts, including a Kumul Petroleum employee, as you mentioned, directing a contract to a company owned by Wapu Sonk, who is in fact, as we've mentioned, the CEO of Kumul Petroleum, and awarding another contract to a senior member of staff at Kumul Petroleum, and then using a rental property in Brisbane that is owned by an individual who has recently received contracts from Kumul Petroleum. So coupled with broader concerns about governance, can you break down these different layers of alleged corruption and how they connect?
Again, what it seems like has been happening is that there are corporate structures in Australia, companies set up by Wapu Sonk, that have been set up to allow him to make money on the side. To put it in crude terms, it looks like there's alleged kickbacks that are occurring, and these companies are the recipient of those alleged kickbacks. That may be one of the scenarios. What the paperwork shows is that the power that Wapu Sonk has as the boss of Kumul is being potentially used to feed contracts to these companies in Australia that he secretly owns. But the use of the multi-million-dollar property in Brisbane, why is Wapu Sonk, how can he think it's appropriate that he reside in a property owned by an Australian businessman who's seeking to win contracts from Kumul Petroleum in PNG, and which has already won contracts from Kumul Petroleum in PNG? That's a clear conflict of interest. It's a private commercial relationship that raises questions of corruption. Now, I'm not saying corruption has definitely occurred in respect of this property, but it may have. And we need to know why, or what are the circumstances through which Wapu Sonk got use of this house? Is he paying for it? Is it a gift? If he's not paying for it, why not? If he is paying for it, is he paying market rates? I mean, these are questions, again, we've asked Wapu Sonk. He did not answer them. Now, if he was paying market rates, market rent, he'd tell us. So one would imagine he would. The businessman who is hiring or owns this house through another corporate structure, I put questions to him about his relationship with Kumul. He refused to answer those questions as well. Why? Why are these men so secretive? Now, this is not just a PNG problem. There's an Australian businessman here who may, or certainly has questions to answer as to why he's giving a property he controls to the head of a state-owned enterprise in Papua New Guinea, at the same time he's seeking to win contracts from that same state-owned enterprise. I mean, that's a clear conflict of interest, and it raises, it's very corruption prone. There's a real risk of corruption when such commercial relationships develop. And again, we need the Australian end of this to answer questions, and that's not yet happened. And I hope through programs like this, there will be more pressure on these players to face the music and tell the people of PNG what's going on.
Absolutely. This investigation has certainly sparked public interest and concern. And as you mentioned, we have to start somewhere. We have to talk about it. Why should this story matter to Papua New Guineans and Australians too? What are the broader consequences when state-owned companies operate in secrecy or without independent oversight, particularly across borders?
I mean, ultimately, the people of PNG, especially those suffering in poverty, deserve good hospitals or better hospitals and better healthcare. They deserve better roads. They deserve better education. Kumul Petroleum is ultimately there to improve those outcomes for the people of PNG. When deals like this are struck, it's the ultimate form of crony capitalism. It is rich people getting richer at the expense of poor people who are getting poorer. That's why it's so egregious. That's why it's so disgusting. Now, it's a real privilege that Wapu Sonk has when he is given his title as the CEO and Managing Director of Kumul Petroleum. It's his job to guard the money this entity makes and its power and its influence in PNG for the benefit of the people of Papua New Guinea, not for the benefit of himself. And at the heart of this scandal is the question as to whether these resources, this money, this influence has been abused by one man or several to benefit themselves at the expense of the people of Papua New Guinea. And now I think early days, sure, but the failure of Wapu Sonk to answer some of these questions and the paperwork that we've uncovered, which shows at the very least potential corrupt infrastructure being set up around these companies that could allow Sonk to profit secretly and improperly. I mean, this all paints a pretty ugly picture. Why does this matter to the people of Australia? We need a healthy, vibrant, democratic Papua New Guinea because it is in the interest of all liberal democracies in the region to be strong, safe, vibrant and prospering. I mean, Australia talks a very big game when it comes to these issues. It needs to put its money where its mouth is, and where there is corruption and where Australians are a party to alleged corruption, suspected corruption, we too must act on our end. The elephant in the room in all this is China. We know China's trying to seed influence across the Pacific. We know a country like Papua New Guinea is a place of great influence contest between Australia and America on the one hand and China on the other. China is throwing around money and influence in Papua New Guinea in unhealthy ways too. Papua New Guinean officials are taking that money and allowing themselves to be influenced in improper ways, I've got no doubt. Australia is seeking to push back at that through its own means. Now, we say in Australia we play healthily. We play in a corruption-free way. The PNG NRL rugby league deal is a great example of this. Tens of millions of dollars of Australian taxpayer money to allow the PNG rugby league to enter the Australian competition. It's a diplomatic, strategic and security coup for Australia and PNG to deepen our relationships and to push China away. That's no doubt that's what's going on. But Australia, in doing so, must make sure it's not playing the same games Australia's accusing China of playing, which is engaging in deals where they know, or we know that PNG officials may improperly profit, where we know there'll be the risk of corruption, where we know there'll be the risk of an abuse of power. Because ultimately that poisons PNG. It poisons PNG's liberal democracy. It poisons PNG's ability to grow as a country, to stand up against corruption, be it coming from China, be it coming from Australia, or be it involving PNG politicians themselves.
Well said. The Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Honourable James Marape, has stated that he has personally written to the Sydney Morning Herald requesting findings from your investigation. Can you confirm that you have received that correspondence, and will you provide the information requested?
Yeah, but just an hour ago I received an email from the Prime Minister's advisor. I will certainly help. We'll provide the documentation that's been requested. Of course, I'm not a policing agency. I don't have the powers to go and find money trails and check bank accounts. Only the PNG authorities and the Australian authorities can do that. So we can provide some information, but it would be a grave mistake if the PNG government and authorities are simply relying on an Australian journalist to do this investigation, because we can take it so far. Then it's over to you. It's over to the authorities to use their powers to really lift under those rocks that we can't lift under. But certainly we'll be providing that information that's being requested and more, and supporting any investigation that's occurring.
Finally, Nick, I'd like to close by bringing this back to the people, especially for Papua New Guinea, as we mentioned, and Australia. As Papua New Guinea approaches its 50th year of independence, the toll of corruption is undeniable. It has stalled development, weakened institutions, and undermined public trust. What message or words of encouragement would you share with Papua New Guineans who see corruption, but they feel powerless to speak out?
I would say stay angry, stay passionate, keep fighting for justice. And it's just vital that we have strong medias in both Australia and Papua New Guinea, strong journalism that is exposing this stuff. That people are continually putting pressure on the powerful to do the right thing. I think a wonderful thing about this story is it blows up on Facebook and other social media channels, and the people of Papua New Guinea, you can tell lots of people are angry, are disgusted, are demanding answers, and I'd encourage them to keep doing so. I myself, as an Australian journalist, I'm passionate about holding the Australians to account who are ripping off PNG, and I will endeavour to keep doing that. And we do that in solidarity with PNG journalists and with the people of PNG who are as concerned at this behaviour as we are.
Thank you, Nick. We stand with you on that in the fight against corruption, both in Papua New Guinea and Australia. Thank you so much for your time, for your courage, and for being the example that you've set, not only in Australia, but across the world. We're truly privileged because your work reminds us of the power of truth and the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. We thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
To our viewers, as Nick reminded us, his job is done. He investigated and he uncovered what he clearly identified as corruption. And he did what any committed journalist should do. He reported the facts and brought them to the public's attention. Nick told us that just an hour before speaking to us, he received an email from the Office of the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, formally requesting the evidence and information from his investigation. And he made it clear he will cooperate fully and provide them with the material that they have asked for. But Nick also made something else very clear. He is not the police. He does not have the power to subpoena individuals. He cannot access private bank accounts linked to the companies in question, PNG Developments Proprietary Limited or otherwise. He does not have the legal or investigative authority to go further. But the Papua New Guinean government does, and the Australian government does too. And that's why now the responsibility shifts. It shifts over to us. And when I say us, I mean all of us, the collective Papua New Guineans who love our country, the Papua New Guineans who don't want to see what God has blessed us with, our land, our resources, our potential, plundered for the benefit of a few. But it should be used for the good of all. The Papua New Guineans who want new schools for our children. The Papua New Guineans who want functioning hospitals for our families. The Papua New Guineans who want a better life, not just for ourselves, but for our children and for generations to come. So what now? It is our job to demand answers, to demand action, to demand accountability. We need to hear clearly from our leaders. Will ICAC investigate this? What will the Prime Minister's office do with the information they have requested? And just as importantly, we need to hear from the Board of Kumul Petroleum. What actions will they take to investigate this matter internally? What decisions will be made to restore transparency and public trust? We need this investigated by the right authorities in the right way, with independence, transparency, and public oversight. Because we cannot allow this to become just another story that fades into silence. That's what some politicians are counting on, that we will forget. That the struggles of our daily life will distract us from why we're struggling in the first place. But we must not forget. We must remain focused. We must stay informed, and we must act. So I invite you to join me. Join Coffee with Lewa. Join the movement of right-thinking Papua New Guineans who love this country deeply. Together, let's hold our government accountable, because accountability is not just their duty, it is our right. To our viewers, it's your turn now. Let's take this conversation to the comment section. Let us know your thoughts. We want to hear from you. How do we hold our leaders accountable and ensure that this story does not fade away without action? If you found this conversation meaningful and you want to see more, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with your family and your friends to keep this dialogue flowing. We appreciate you and we thank you for being here. We'll see you on the next one right here on Coffee with Lewa.